grilled cheese. So we're gonna start on our muffins first. First, we're gonna make the crumb topping for our blueberry muffins. So I'm gonna put in 3 tablespoons of melted butter in my little bowl right here. And then a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar and a 1/2 cup of flour. And we're just gonna do a quick mix on that. And put that to the side. And that's just gonna be our crumb topping on top of our muffins. And we're gonna make about a dozen muffins today. So here's my 1/2 cup of sugar. And now I need a 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour. Put that in there with my butter and my sugar. And then I'm just gonna grab a fork and give it a quick stir. That in there with my butter and my sugar. And then I'm just gonna grab a fork and give it a quick stir so that topping feeling to it. So it's gonna be kind of shaggy when you do it, really crumbly. So just stir it up like this on top of our muffins. There. So it's getting to be the nice crumbly thing, and this I just think adds an extra good touch to the muffin. I think it adds a pop of sweetness on them, and these aren't overly sweet muffins, but this just adds a nice little texture. So I've got it all mixed up, and I'm just gonna put this to the side, and we're gonna use that towards the end. Now we're gonna start with our wet ingredients, and then we'll do our dry ingredients and we'll mix them together. So for my wet ingredients, I'm gonna add in 1 stick of melted butter. And shake, 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 get off there. And then 3 tablespoons of sour cream. So I just kind of scoop them in. It's okay if they're a little over or not. This is gonna add just a nice moisture to your blueberry muffins. There we go, and then 1 more. So 3 tablespoons of sour cream. And then a 1/2 cup of our sourdough discard. So I fed my discard yesterday, and then I'm gonna feed it a little bit later so I can make some yummy loaf sourdough bread later. But I'm gonna give it a good stir, and then just to make sure it's all mixed up. And then I'm gonna put in a 1/2 cup of sourdough discard. Okay. Shake it off in there. This is gonna give you that nice kind of tart flavor in your blueberry muffin. Perfect. Put this over here. We're gonna feed her in a little bit. And I'm going to add in teaspoon of vanilla and 2 eggs, and then we'll mix all this together. So a teaspoon of vanilla and then 2 whole eggs, and then we'll give it a good mix in just a second. So 1 and 2. Get a spoon out, and where's the good one that I like? We'll use this one. And I'm just gonna pop the eggs first, make sure their yolks are broken up, and then I'm just gonna try to really mix my wet ingredients together. That way when I combine them to our dry ingredients, they'll be well mixed together, and that way everything will have equal kind of proportions throughout, so it bakes fairly even. So stirring it up, but I'm not gonna beat it. I don't wanna beat my yolks. I just wanna mix everything together until it is completely combined. You can see I have like chunks of sour cream. I still gotta mix those up. And I'm making sure I scrape all around. And then we will make our dry base, which I will make sure it gets mixed around. The reason why we just don't dump everything in a bowl together is because we're using baking powder and baking soda, and we want to make sure that's thoroughly mixed throughout our mix so that everything will rise on its own without having pockets of having the baking agent in it. So there we go. I've got this mixed up fairly good. And now we're gonna start on our dry. So for our dry, we're gonna start out with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. For muffins, you really want to start on our dry. So for our dry, we're gonna start out with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. For muffins, you really want to use all-purpose. Don't use bread flour because it just has a really dense muffin. So 1 and 2. 2 cups of flour. And then 1 cup of sugar, of white sugar. With the blueberry muffins, white sugar is what you want to use. With other recipes like a brown sugar will taste much better. But for blueberry, white is perfect. And then 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So I've got my baking powder right here. And if you don't have baking powder at home, you can just use a little bit of baking soda and some. So 1 and 2. And then I'm going to use a ½ teaspoon of baking soda, which has a lot more reactive agent in it than baking powder. So I've got a ½ teaspoon of baking soda. And then I'm going to add in a ½ teaspoon of salt. Just to give, I always use salt in my baking because it just makes the flavors burst, I think. Salt really brings out flavors. So ½ teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to use a tablespoon of cornstarch. And this will just help it thicken up as well. And my tablespoon measure is dirty, so there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon if you didn't know that. So I'm just going to do 3 teaspoons, but that is the same as a tablespoon of cornstarch. There we go. And then I'm going to put in some lemon zest. So I have my fresh lemon here, and this is just a zester. And I'm going to go and just kind of scrape around the outside of my lemon. You can see the lemon zest falling into this. This is just going to give it a nice little zing in your muffin. Lemon and blueberry just really work well together. They're a good pair. And also right now I have my oven. It's preheating to 350. That's what we're going to cook our muffins on. Get a little scrape here. Perfect. You need about a teaspoon of lemon zest, which I find is about 1 lemon zested. There we go. Perfect. My lemon's very cold, it's a little bit. And then I'm gonna use a whisk, and I'm going to stir this up with my whisk really good. I find a whisk works better than a spoon for making sure your ingredients are really mixed together. You could use a sifter if you wanted to. I just think that's a pain, so I just whisk them together well. Here we go. And now that I have them really whisked in, we're gonna add in a cup of blueberries. So I'm just gonna eye it. I feel like this is about a cup of blueberries.
Question, what are you making, and is it sourdough?
Yes, I'm using sourdough, and this is gonna be our blueberry muffins with sourdough discard in it. And then I'm making an Italian grilled cheese in just a little bit. You can use fresh or frozen blueberries if you wanted to. We just had a bit of fresh ones ready to get used. So I'm just gonna stir them up in here and kind of mix them with our dry ingredients well. And now we're gonna mix in our wet ingredients. For those who have joined us a little bit later, this is 8 tablespoons of butter, so a stick of melted butter, with 2 eggs, a ½ cup of sourdough starter, 3 tablespoons of sour cream, and a teaspoon of vanilla. And we're gonna pour these into our dry ingredients. And I'm just gonna really scrape off all of this liquid. Make sure I get it all in here. And again, the reason why we mix our wet ingredients together than our dry, it's just so that the baking agents really get thoroughly mixed around and spread out, because the baking soda and the baking powder will react with the egg in our mix, and that's what's gonna give your muffin a rise. So I have those all in here, and we're gonna give it a nice stir, and we're just gonna combine them until they're just combined. We don't want to over mix too much, but just stir them up nicely. Perfect. And with the sourdough, or with the sourdough starter and the sour cream in it, Those are just gonna give it a lovely, like more of a tart flavor that really kind of cuts through some of the sweetness. As long also with the lemon zest. So I've got it kind of mixed up here. Perfect. And you see how it's a little bit drier of a batter? That is because the blueberries are, when they heat up, they're really gonna let out some liquid. So I don't want a super liquidy batter when I'm making this, because otherwise it just won't, it will just be kind of a soggy muffin. And I want a nice firm muffin that is moist and delicious. So I'm almost done. And I have my cookie, or not, my cupcake tin right here, and I'm gonna put in some foil liners. I like the foil over the parchment paper ones. I just think they cook more nicely, but you could also just grease a cupcake pan if you wanted. I just find it's hard to get them out when you grease them. So I'm gonna lay out my liners. Again, I like the foil one because for some reason, I just feel like they cook better in the foil over the parchment, but that also could just be, you know, perceived perfection. I have no proof. There we go. So I've got my 12 out here, and I'm just gonna get a kitchen spoon, a little tablespoon, because it'll be easier to scoop into each one, because it is a bit more of a thicker batter. So I'm just gonna scoop kind of a good sized blob. I'm trying to make them even as possible into each muffin holder. And this, again, it makes about 12 muffins, and they are really good and delicious. Have a nice sweetness to them, a good flake as well. The sourdough, I think, as like the good flake as well. The sourdough, I think, as like the key. Just like I made blueberry biscuits with a lemon glaze, and they were so good. They were really flaky and had a nice zing to them. They were really flaky and had a nice zing to them. I heard there's a trick that if you actually bake your muffins like every other one and leave the other not. I did it once and it worked, but I only have so many muffin pans. There we go, we're almost filling up these guys, making sure they push down. Filling up these guys, making sure they push down. Look like there. And then when we're done scooping these up in here, what we're gonna do is we are going to add some of our crumb topping to the top of it. There we go. Gotta fill this. So yeah, it's much different than if you were to make, like, if you make a store mix of like blueberry muffins, it's really runny. So it's definitely a heartier muffin than what you would do with a store-bought mix, but it has the great flavor profile. And again, the blueberries, when they cook, they release some of the blueberry juices, which will help bring down the the density of it. Perfect. And now I'm just gonna go through and just scoop off a little bit into each one. Extra, very nice. You could also do, if you wanted to have more muffins and less, you could fill them less up. And then you could probably get 18 out of these if you wanted to, make them smaller. But I love our muffins with the big dome top on it. I feel like the muffin top is the best part of the muffin. Okay. I'm just filling these up nicely. Perfect. Get a couple more scoops. I'm gonna try to make them all to be about as evenly filled as possible so that they are all evenly cooked. Put a little bit more in this guy. And because it is a denser muffin, you don't have to worry about these like exploding over, like, oh, there's too much batter in it. I said they're gonna cook up, they're gonna puff up, but they're not gonna like denser nicer muffin, you don't have to worry about these like exploding over, like, oh, there's too much batter in it. I said they're gonna cook up, they're gonna puff up, but they're not gonna like liquefied over. And that's also because you were using butter in here instead of oil. Perfect. Now we have these about all even out, and I've got, perfect, got mine batter just about done. Yummy. And now what we're gonna do, steal a little over here, make this guy a little bit bigger, and try to do it with a spoon. So here's our yummy crumb topping, and we're just gonna kind of take a little handful and just kind of push it in just like that. A spoon, I feel like it will just kind of fall off. You kind of want to give it a little push on the top to make it stick. Perfect. Nice. Get that in there. And this really adds, I think, it adds a texture to it, a nice crumbly top, like a blueberry, almost like a blueberry crisp or blueberry coffee cake. It adds just a nice little light sweetness to the top, which I find delicious. It's just like I love coffee cake and any streusel topping on muffins. I think that just adds an extra thing that really brings them over the edge. Perfect. So just almost got it all. So we have our delicious blueberry muffins made with our sourdough discard. And I have my oven preheated to 350. And I'm gonna pop these in. And they're gonna need about 15 minutes or so to cook, but I like to check them after 10 minutes. And I'm gonna pop these in. And they're gonna need about 15 minutes or so to cook, but I like to check them after 10 minutes and just kind of eye it from there, because I find some baking always changes. And give my hands a little wash, and we're gonna pop these in our preheated oven that we have at 350 degrees. Again, these were our blueberry muffins that we made with our sourdough discard. I have them on here. My oven's preheated. That's a key. You want to make sure your oven is fully preheated. And now we are going to work on our grilled cheese today. Today we're going to do kind of a Italian style grilled cheese with some sauteed red peppers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start up. I'm going to cut some red peppers, and I'm going to put them on my skillet and just saute them a little bit and take them off so I can add them to the inside of my grilled cheese. Put them on my skillet and just saute them a little bit and take them off so I can add them to the inside of my grilled cheese, because I feel like the saute just makes them a little bit softer and makes their flavor come out more. So just a nice, easy, thin slice on them, because you want to be able to bite into them without getting too big of a chunk. So I'm just doing kind of like almost a little bit bigger than a julienne style, but nice and thin, just like this. Perfect. And then I'm going to throw these on my skillet right over here. I'm going to just let them toast up while I assemble my grilled cheese. So I'm going to turn this guy onto high and just put a teensy bit of butter on here so they just have a little bit of fat to cook in. And I'll have those. I'm going to let them saute up while we assemble our grilled cheese. I really like it with there. And then some baby arugula. It has a nice lemon peppery to it, and it's going to pair nicely with our peppers and the Italian or the salami. So I'm going to use sourdough bread. This is an everything sourdough bread. It has like everything bagel seasoning on the outside of it. And I thought, oh, that will actually pair nicely with an Italian style grilled cheese. Here we go. Make 3 of them. And then with my grilled cheese, I don't put butter down on my skillet when I'm doing it. I just make sure I coat one side of each slice of bread with a little bit of butter, and that's what's gonna crisp up on our skillet. So that's why I always have soft butter sitting out. It's funny, I grew up and I never had butter out on the counter. We always had it in the fridge. But if it's in the fridge, it doesn't spread nice on it. So we just never really used butter on anything growing up. But my husband, on the other hand, he grew up with always having a stick of butter out on the plate. And I didn't realize how much a difference having soft butter made when you're cooking and baking or toasting up bread, making sandwiches, but it does. It makes a big difference. It spreads nicely. You don't need as much. You don't rip your bread trying to spread cold butter. You don't have to go through the process of softening it. But it does work so much better. There we go. Perfect. So I've got I put on just half of my bread, and I'll flip all of it over so we can assemble. So I'm going to start out with my Havarti, and I'm going to put a slice of Havarti on each piece. Perfect. Might tear them a little bit because I don't want the cheese to overflow, because otherwise that will just go down and melt and burn. So I really try to make sure that the cheese doesn't go over the edge of our grilled cheese. Otherwise you'll just have burnt cheese in the container. And one more. Perfect. And Havarti, I said, it's a great cheese for grilled cheese because it just melts so nice. It has a great melting point. I'm hearing my things over here sizzle a little bit, so I'm just gonna give them a quick toss. Perfect. And then our next, what we're going to do is I'm gonna put some salami on it, hard salami. Also, Genoa salami works well, or any of those like Italian salamis that you can get will work well. This is just a favorite in our house, and we'll use it also for like charcuteries. We just love just good old hard salami. So I'm gonna put, I wanna say, since they're pretty big slices, 2 on each one. My rule of thumb when I'm making grilled cheeses with meat is I don't overload the meat, because if you overload the meat, the middle will stay cold and it will not melt. So if I ever do a super meaty grilled cheese or a melt, a lot of times I'll do that in the oven on the air fryer setting, and I'll cook them open. That way the inside will get hot. Otherwise, if you pile it up here, you'll get your bread nice and crispy, but the inside will be cold, and that's no good. Give it a little toss. Perfect. And my goal with these is I just want them to get heated up and to soften a little bit. Perfect. And now I'm going to put a little bit of arugula on each one. This is going to add a little, arugula, if you've never had it before, it has a similar texture to, like spinach. It's soft and it will wilt when you heat it up, but it has a lemony pepper flavor to it. So it has a little bit of a kick, which I find pairs really well in sandwiches. You can also wilt it, and I've done it with like a lemon pesto pasta, and I've wilted some arugula with that. But it's just a really nice herb. I guess it's a mix between an herb and a lettuce, but it has a nice fragrant flavor, not too overpowering, not super spicy. So I'm just putting a little bit on each one, and then we're going to put our onion, or our chopped up and sauteed. Perfect. They've already just started to brown a little bit on here. So I'm going to turn off the heat real quick, and I'm just going to layer them across here. And the peppers, I think, just blend really well with the salami, and they'll melt in nicely with the cheese as well. But it just gives you a nice little flavor boost and crunch. Again, I would use sweet peppers with this. Bell peppers, green bell peppers in particular, it's my least favorite, but they kind of have a bitter flavor. But these are just those little teeny sweet peppers, and they're really great for throwing on a sandwich, or you can eat them like in salads as well. And then last but not least, I always coat my sandwiches with 2 slices of cheese. So I will do the cheese on the bottom, I'll put all my filling in the middle, and then I'm gonna do a slice of cheese on the top. And this is really important to really get that good cheesy like effect. Perfect. And for some reason we got a little straggler bit here. And then we're gonna flip it over. And I'm gonna turn my skillet to a medium. Perfect. And I'm gonna plop each one of these guys on here. And you don't wanna have your skillet up too high, because what will happen is you will end up burning your toast before the insides can get nice and cool and melty. I'll set it right here. We got a little guy. So I'm having mine right now on about a 4 to 6, and I'm gonna let it cook and crisp up. But we can come take a little peek at the blueberry muffins, see how they are rising right now. So I'll turn on the light, I'm gonna look at them, and then I'll pop it open and you guys can see how they've puffed up. They still need about 5 or so minutes left, 5-10 minutes left. You see how they're puffing up and getting a little bit bigger and more domed. Blueberry muffins, if you cook with a streusel topping on, they actually take a little bit longer than if you don't, because it's very heavy and dense that the air inside doesn't escape out and cook it as fast. So they typically need a few minutes longer than if you were to do a muffin without a streusel topping.
You got a comment saying you should be on the Food Network.
You know, I always got growing up and I always get, oh, you should open up a restaurant or you should cook. And I said, I don't know if I would enjoy it if I had to cook for people all the time. I mean, I cook for my family and we're a large family, and that can be a daunting task at its own. And I found that there's always going to be somebody who's unhappy about the meal I cook. Oh, look at this. I'm doing my first flip. And remember, when I make my grilled cheeses, I like to cook them on each side twice. And the reason why I do that is it allows the bread and the cheese to start heating up. And then it cooks it, and then I'll cook it on there, and then I'll flip it over for the final golden crust of it. That's the way the cheese has more time for it to melt and to get heated up. Because you got to think about this pan's got to heat all of this through the bread. Then you don't want to turn it up too high, because then it will just crisp up and just is not good. But yes.
You got a question, if I ever cook or bake. I used to bake quite a bit of bread, but no, cooking, no. We met really young, so she's always, I haven't learned. I guess it's been 20 years. I still have not learned.
He has not learned. He has cooked me food before, but I valued my life. And when he served me chicken, it was still raw on the inside. It was fajitas, and he like diced it up and cooked it. It looked fine, and I bite in, and it was good. So I enjoy my life, so I cook. He used to make, we have a bread maker at times, so he used to make bread, and he would make that for us. He made a really good like potato bread in the bread maker. Let me put that out there. It was no hand, it was measuring ingredients and following directions. While we're waiting on this to cook up, I'm actually gonna feed my starter because I wanna make some bread with it. So let me get a measuring cup and this. So what I'm going to do is, I'm gonna give it about 9 tablespoons of flour and about a half a cup of water to make it. But you know what? I hear these crisping up over here, so I might need to flip them real quick for their second cook time. Perfect. Nice. Good. I always rotate my pan around because I find that my burner over here is hotter than on this side. So right there. But I'm gonna do my starter real quick, that way it will be ready. Key is with making sourdough, make sure your flour is unbleached. If it is bleached, it will it kills off all of the organisms, and that prevents it from really fermenting and creating the starter base. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I just do when I'm making my starter, I do pretty exact on a scale. But with my feeding, I just kind of follow just half and half. So 9 tablespoons with 9 tablespoons of water, which will be just under a half a cup. I'm gonna pour this in here and I'm gonna give it a good stir. And that way, I'll stir it up. Just mix it to there, but that I'm feeding it so that I can make start a loaf of bread later tonight, because you wanna make sure you fed your starter within like 6 to 12 hours of making your loaf of bread. There we go. Let me go check on these grilled cheese. I hear them sizzling nicely, which is what I want. Oh, perfect. Let's look at this side. That's perfect. Good. I think one of these will be ready to cut open. I'm going to show you. I'll turn off my thing here. And again, for this grilled cheese, I used an everything sourdough bread. And I used a Havarti cheese because it has a great melting point. Hard salami, arugula, and I sauteed up some sweet peppers. And look at this. You can see that cheese, look at that glob of cheese. It's so melty. You have a nice mix of cheese and peppers. I like this. This one I like a lot. I like to be very creative with my grilled cheeses so that, you know, you don't feel like you're eating the same thing every day. But it doesn't take a lot of work, but they're so good. So I'm making sure I'm mixing up and combining my flour and my water really well. Good. And then I'm going to put my cheesecloth back over it and let it ferment on my countertop. If you don't want to feed it as often or you don't make as many recipes, you can store yours after you've got a full ferment on it. After about a week, you can store it in the fridge for up to a week at a time between feedings. But I try to make stuff with my sourdough or my discard all the time, like biscuits, pancakes, waffles, muffins. So I'm constantly just using it, feeding it, and just, you know, use and keep it out on my counter. But the big problem is when we were on winter break, I forgot to put it in my fridge for our cruise, and mine molded. Here we go. So let's check on the muffins and see how they are progressing. They're not done yet, but I'll show you guys a quick pop. You can see they've popped at the things, but if you touch them, you see they're not quite firm. They're getting there. But these probably need maybe 5 or so more minutes. So I think I might let you guys go here, but I can actually run through real quick on the recipes if you want, real fast. So our blueberry muffins, if you jumped in late, they were super easy. So first we started with our wet ingredients, which was a cup of melted butter and 2 eggs, a half a cup of sourdough starter, 3 tablespoons of sour cream, and a teaspoon of vanilla. And we mixed that up really good, got all the clumps out. And then our base with the dry ingredients was 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, a tablespoon of cornstarch, half teaspoon of salt, some lemon zest from a fresh lemon, and a cup of blueberries. We mixed all those together. And then we mixed the wet with the dry, and then I made a crumb topping with sugar, butter, and flour. Put it all together, and now they're baking. But since they're going to take longer, I'm not going to keep you guys waiting for too long, but I'll post a picture later. But don't forget to like and subscribe. I enjoy cooking and doing everything like that and showing just the recipes that we use around the house, and kind of just show you how we eat over here with our big army of, 7. But thanks again for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.